I want to get right into the discussion. And so I want to introduce our panelists today that we are just absolutely thrilled to have. We have what I would consider to be absolute experts in the field of school counseling and supporting school counselors and really getting the most out of our school counselors. And first, I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Trish Hatch, Professor Emeritus at San Diego State University and President and CEO of Hatching Results, a professional learning and consulting company focused on improving school counseling programs, program outcomes for students. Trish is a recipient of multiple national awards, best-selling author on several books about best practices in school counseling, served as a consultant to the U.S. Department of Ed and as a thought leader to the Obama administration. Dr. Hatch is the author of ASCA, National Model of Framework for School Counseling Programs. A friend of our organization is WhyTry and an absolute legend in the field. Welcome, Trish. We're thrilled to have you.
Delighted to be here. Thank you. And I'm going to give credit to my co-author, Judy Bowers, because I have to be fair to say I'm co-author of the original version, but I want to make sure Judy gets her credit as well. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I'm excited, so excited to be on here today with Damien. And I'm excited to have this opportunity to speak to our counselors. Thank you.
Well, that leads us to our second panelist, Dr. Damien Sweeney. Damien serves as the program coordinator for comprehensive school counseling at the Kentucky Department of Education, where he works alongside school counselors to equip them with best practices. He oversaw the publication of the Kentucky Framework of Best Practices for School Counselors, contributed to guidance on how districts can facilitate conversations about race-based stress and trauma for districts and schools in Kentucky. Also recently, and this is, I guess, it's not even recently anymore. This is just established old news, but was published in the ASCA magazine titled "Stand Up, Stand Together. Now is the time for school counselors to take a stand and fight for social justice on equity for Black students." He's got a passion for change agency and social justice. He's served as a special ed teacher, English teacher, high school counselor, and adjunct professor. And we are so thrilled to have him. Welcome, Damien.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
And I am going to mention Damien's repeat. Damien was on one of my favorite webinars we did last year, where we talked about hope and equity. You can find that archived if you go to our website, whytry.org, and click on webinars. If you're interested in any of our previous library of webinars, that one that Damien did was, I think, really exceptional. And there was some really important information that was shared, and we are just thrilled to have you back. So,
thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All right, well, let's get right into it. We want to get to the subject at hand. We're going to target going for about an hour today. I think it's probably going to be a conversational piece where we have a lot of ideas being shared, and hopefully there will be some information that I think everybody on here will find exciting, and we couldn't have better people to lead this. So my goal is to keep you talking and try to stay out of the way. Oh, I forgot. Let me introduce myself. I'm Jason Johnson. I'm like furniture at this point on these. I'm just around. I'm a school psychologist. I was published on the topic of adolescent resilience. I've been with the WhyTry organization for about 5 years now. And it's just been an absolute awesome treat to be able to network and become friends and colleagues with some of these people that I just respect deeply. So I'm just grateful to be here and to take it all in as well. So let's jump right into it. And I want to start with just having both of our panelists tell us a little bit about what you've been up to recently. And you can define recently, however, whatever that means to you, but what you've been up to recently, specifically in regards to supporting school counselors. Let's start with Damien. We'll go with Damien first and then Trish.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much. Again, super excited to be here. So as you mentioned, we recently released the Kentucky Framework of Best Practices for School Counselors in July. And we work with our graduate school programs in our state, school counselors all over our state at every level, elementary, middle, and high, to really come up with something that was very similar and aligned to ASCA's national model. I often train our school counselors in Kentucky to build comprehensive school counseling programs, and I collaborate with our regional education cooperatives. We've got 8 in our state, so I'm often with them and just trying to build those comprehensive school counseling programs. Lately, I've been teaching about sources of resilience, so I've actually been using the Resilience Breakthrough, the book, as kind of my guide for that, and I've been doing that with school counselors, principals, teachers, and others, and that's been really well received. Our educators, as you know, are just really hurting right now. Many of them are hurting right now, and so when you can introduce things like resilience and make it really personal for them, it seems to be very helpful. I've been advocating for school counselors with our principals and superintendents as often as possible. So I know that many on the call will give me a thumbs up for that, because you know that's something that you're really seeking. And working with our Kentucky School Counseling Association, we just have such a dynamic program in our state with dynamic leadership, and they're doing some really cool stuff too. Last week, I completed my second ever ASCA webinar on facilitating courageous conversations in anti-racist organizations. So that was really, really exciting. And then I'm preparing to do a similar workshop with Gear Up, which is, folks they often advise our kids for post-secondary success. And then we've got positions called Family Resource Youth Service Coordinators in our state. So I'm preparing that presentation for them as well. Just a few final things. We recently released guidance on how whole schools can support student and staff wellness. So super proud of that, because we've really got to put the mental health of our people, not only our students, but also our staffs at the forefront. Recently released guidance on how schools and districts can facilitate courageous conversations about race. This one I think you're going to really appreciate. We recently got with our Office of Legal Services and released guidance on why it is important for all schools to use student preferred names. So something super proud. I'm currently collaborating with kind of a collective of different counselors throughout the country and professors throughout the country. Many of you have seen them on social media, School Counselors for MTSS. And so we're working on several projects with that. And then to finish up, we partner with our local Kentucky Education Television, and we've recently created a mental health course for all educators, along with a suicide prevention refresher. In our state, all students that are 6th grade to 12th grade must get suicide prevention information every year before September 15th. And we don't think that should just happen one time. So we really push to get more information to be taught, particularly right before the break on that as well. So that's what I've been up to.
Thank you so much for sharing. Love that. Trish.
First of all, I'm just so impressed with and so grateful for Damien. I wish every state had a Damien. And many states do have a designated person to support the school counselors in their state, but not every state does. And it's a big, big deal. So if you're in a state that has someone like Damien doing this work, you may think like it's oh, everyone has that. But the reality of it is it's not true. Many states do not. And that leadership is so essential, especially because he draws on the work of those school counselors in his own state, partners with them on the documents he puts together. And it's so important that they're part of that conversation. So I'm just so grateful for his role. And if I had one fantasy for this year, it would be that every single State Department of Ed had a person in place like Damien doing the work he's doing. So let's advocate for that. So, okay, back up to what we've done. First of all, I think the most important thing we did was survive. If I could just say, like, we made it, we made it through the year. When it first happened, everyone was hunkering down. It was a little bit anxiety producing. We're a professional development company that does in-person training. And I'm also a daughter of 2 parents who were on hospice last year at this time when we went down to, it went into the pandemic. And so we needed to pivot very quickly. And I can't tell you how impressed I am with our team, who completely put the entire professional development model virtually. So we did a lot of flipped classroom models. We've done a tremendous amount of consultation and collaboration and new methods of delivering PD, which has been very helpful to us and to the counselors that we serve. We've created some wonderful business relationships. WhyTry is one of them, partnerships and collaborations with other people doing this work as well. And that just has made us much stronger. We're continuing with our National School Counselor Leadership Conference. It's next month. If you haven't been and you'd like to be, I hope you'll look it up. We already have almost double the number of people who came last year. So the beauty of virtual is that people can come who normally couldn't come, which is amazing. That leads us into the next thing we did, which we had the opportunity because of virtual to, Terry and I did a talk for Kenya at a conference on career awareness for, in another country. We could not have done that before. So some silver linings have come out of this, very difficult and challenging time. But I think as we move forward, we'll have a much more positive professional development work because we've been stretched and to pivot and to grow in certain ways. We did release our Black Lives Matter statement. If you haven't seen it, it's posted on our website. And we've developed with Dr. Rebecca Pianta and Derek Francis Anti-Racist School Counseling Professional Learning Series, which is now part of what we offer. When we put our online courses out there, we had thousands of people who took advantage. And then I think what happened is they're like, oh man, we're zoomed out. So we are continuing to update our online courses. And now we have the opportunity for people to get credits and units doing that through a CEU and CEUs through our CSU collaboration. But the thing I'm real excited about is that Judith Hartline and I were able to spend a great deal of time this last year revising the use of data in school counseling textbook. And so the second edition is now in. We will do edits, but it's in. I guess for me, the rewarding thing that I've been able to do is to have the privilege of leading an incredible team led by Whitney Triplett and Lisa De Gregorio. And the amount of consulting and collaborating we've done has really given me so much faith and hope in our professional school counselors, the light that's on their faces when they come to our consultations and say, we're making a difference, and they feel it and they know it. To be able to be a support to those school counselors right now is incredibly rewarding. So I'll pause there and wait for the next one.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for those that are curious, we'll put up a slide towards the end with information on the conference that Trish referenced, that virtual conference, if that's something that you want more information on. So we'll make sure we get that up. What I want to do now is just kind of jump right into the good stuff, the stuff I know people are always the most interested in. And I want to throw it out to you to see if you'd be willing to share some ideas or tips or strategies for counselors right now that can help them kind of maximize their effectiveness. We're certainly in an unusual time. And I think all educators, Damien summed it up really nice, really are hurting right now. Counselors are playing a really, really important role in all of this. And so I'd love to hear some tips or strategies to help us, to help maximize effectiveness of our counselors. And let's just reverse the order. Let's start with Trish first, and then hear from Damien second.
Well, thank you. Efficiency and effectiveness is one of the main pillars of what's the theories behind the work that we do, in terms of organizational efficiency, institutional legitimacy, and garnering political social capital. And efficiency and effectiveness is really about figuring out what works, what doesn't, doing more of what works and less of what doesn't. And that means that counselors are being creative. They're trying new things, which we just love. Having them try new and creative ways to impact students, to support them, to get them engaged, to measure and monitor their impact. Many school counselors are experimenting with that, and we're so grateful that they're thinking very creatively about different ways to measure and monitor the impact that their services are making. Some ways that counselors tell us they are more effective is that they're archiving more of their instructional content. In this way, they're able to post it on their website. Students who miss it can come back later and get instruction on college and career readiness and study strategies and other types of supports that counselors can provide for them. The counselors are getting very good at assessing students with regard to what they know, the attitude, knowledge, and skills that they learn, and they're able to learn from the assessments how they can improve their instructional practice. One of the things that we're hoping counselors could do to be more effective is to, if they can, partner with enough support systems where they're not stuck in tier 3. And for those of us that know tier 1 is for all kids, tier 2 is for some, and tier 3 is for the most students that really need the most intervention. And counselors can get stuck there, kind of like an emergency room. And what we're trying to do is help them create systems with other student service providers, whether inside or outside the school building, so that they're not constantly in the tier 3 model, and that they're able to think of ways to provide those supports so they can focus on what should all students receive and then do larger group interventions. So these are some of the different ways counselors are making a difference and becoming more effective with their time.
Awesome. Thank you, Damien.
All right. I've got a lot of tips. Stop me if it becomes too much.
Bring them.
All right. So first off, we've got to continue to provide direct student services in whatever context we're in, whether that's virtual school counseling or in-person school counseling. And then we've got to do school counseling lessons tied to mindsets and behaviors for student success. Again, in whatever context you're in, if you're virtual, record those sessions, use Screencastify, use Zoom, and hit the record button of your slides. But those lessons are extraordinarily important, especially now. Don't give information dumps. We should offer small bits of information at a time. People are getting information from everywhere. I mean, just think about your inbox right now. I'm sure you're getting invitations for meetings, webinars. You're getting new research. There's just so much out there. Start small, give small bits of information at a time that are digestible. Now more than ever, I talked about the school counseling curriculum lessons. Now more than ever, we've got to have our counselors normalizing some of the emotions our kids are dealing with. I told you that I really try and support and advocate for school counselors by telling our superintendents and our principals that, if you have students that are sitting in classrooms or sitting at home, and maybe they are experiencing anxiety or maybe they're experiencing depression, and nobody in their life has said to them, hey, I just want you to know that these emotions are completely average for your age, then they think that there's some weird kid or outcast that, is alone in this journey. And they don't realize that the kid that's next door, the kid that's sitting, a few desks down from them, are experiencing the same thing. So normalizing emotions is extremely important. And I think that's one of our highest priorities as school counselors. Okay, so we spoke at the Kentucky Department of Education to many students across our state. And one of the things that they said they need the most help on is coping. They're struggling with, how do I cope with the pandemic? How do I cope with not seeing my friends every day, physically? How do I cope with not being able to give people a hug? So coping, doing lessons on coping is important. If you want, I created a Nearpod lesson for our counselors in Kentucky, and if you email me or contact me, I can give that to you. I can share that with you. As Trish said, and I love the way you said it, Trish, innovate. There were always things as a counselor at in Louisville that I would always be like, man, I really want to do this, but I have no time to do it. Well, now's the time to really innovate and think outside the box and get to some of those projects that have been sitting on the shelf. And many of our counselors in Kentucky, we are really good with 2 out of the 3 school counseling domains. So we're really good with academic counseling. We're really good with social emotional counseling, but we struggle with career counseling, right? And understandably so, right? We're really focused on, the social emotional support during a pandemic, along with, how are our kids doing? Are they performing? Are they showing up? Are they succeeding? But we've really got to focus on the career piece. Now, our state has something called the Individual Learning Plan, which is required for 6th grade to 12th graders. So we've created a Google Classroom. We've also created something called ILP Playbooks. They give our counselors these tailor-made lessons that connect, by the way, to all social emotional learning competencies. And our counselors can use those in their school counseling curriculum lessons. They can use those with students, not only to help them build support for their post-secondary goals, but also to help students self-discover. Tell everybody, kids can't figure out where they're going until they realize who they are. So there's got to be that social emotional aspect to career counseling as well. And then right now our school counselors can pop in, right? So even if you're virtual, our superpower is that we show up with compassion and have rapport with students. And normally, we build rapport by getting into classrooms. We see kids in the hallways, at bus duty or lunch duty, et cetera. But we don't necessarily have all of those options now. So, in a virtual world, you can still ask teachers, hey, can I pop in for 5 minutes? Can Can I remind your students about the support that I offer? Can I remind them about crisis hotlines? Can I remind them about these deadlines that are coming up if they're applying to college or looking for scholarships, et cetera? So popping in is going to also be important. So all of that is kind of direct student services, but we've also got to focus on and identify the indirect student services needed. So collaborating with our teachers and other mental health professionals in our building to see who's showing up, who isn't showing up, to see if there have been any yellow or red flags observed that you need to follow up on as well. Something else that we kind of struggle with in terms of consistency throughout our state, but you can get your protocols in check. Do you honestly have a bullying protocol that says, if a student reports bullying to me, whether it's cyberbullying, in-person bullying, et cetera, this is my first step. After that, this is the second step. This is the third step. Well, studies show that if kids don't believe in your actual protocol and that you're going to truly follow up, they're going to be way less apt to actually report, right? Which means that more crises can happen. So making sure that your protocols are in check. Next, complete that annual agreement with your principal to make sure your priorities are aligned for your comprehensive school counseling program. You know, many of you are saying things like, I don't want to be a guidance counselor. I want to be a school counselor that really supports kids in all three domains. But in some cases, your principal is kind of saying, well, no, I need a guidance counselor. Okay, so you need to really come to that person and say, this is an annual agreement where I want to sit down with you. I want to talk to you about the priorities of my comprehensive school counseling program. And I want you to tell me what your priorities are. And let's see where we can kind of meet on some of that stuff. All right, I've got just a few more. Is it okay?
Yes, these are great.
Okay, all right. Collaborate with other mental health professionals to create, this may be a new term for you, but an interconnected systems framework. So that framework is going to explain exactly how you're going to work together with other mental health professionals in your building, in your community, in your district, and all three tiers of that MTSS framework. So you're going to figure out, how are we going to work together to provide lessons and normalize emotions? How are we going to work together to provide individual counseling or small group counseling? And then how are we going to provide support for students needing tier 3 interventions? Okay, so make sure that you're working with those folks and you truly have well-documented plans, because the worst thing is finding out at 10 o'clock at night that something has happened, there's some kind of crisis that's happened, and you're scrambling to figure out, okay, what do I do? Who do I call? What needs to happen? Okay, so make sure that that stuff is well documented. Last couple things, create a mission and vision statement for your comprehensive school counseling program. ASCA's got great templates for that. And then speaking of ASCA templates, look at all of them, right? Their templates are a gold mine in terms of actually helping you build a comprehensive school counseling program. And if you don't want to like print all those off, then they've got a book that you can purchase called ASCA's National Model Implementation Guide. So you can just use that. Last few things, don't overwhelm yourself and try to do everything at once. I've given you a lot of things. If you focus on just one, I think you're going to be doing a lot. So focus on starting small. But also one thing that I like to tell our counselors in Kentucky is we have in our framework of best practices, we've got a self-assessment, and ASCA does too. So look at that self-assessment, see how you are doing in terms of building that comprehensive program, and then figure out where you're doing well and where you need to grow. And then when you decide where you need to grow, again, start small. ASCA's got some amazing ASCA U courses. I've been taking the diversity, equity, and inclusion one. It's incredible. And then I'll finish, I promise, I will finish with this. Use ABC data. So we don't want data-informed school counselors, right? Because I can be a data-informed school counselor where I know that there's a lot of data out there that I can be looking at. Instead, we want to be data-driven school counselors. So use that ABC data, attendance data, behavior data, course passing data. With some of that, with course passing, of course, you can go into graduation rates, retention rates, and all of that. With behavior, you can look at all of your behavior data, but then you can start disaggregating that data based on population. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Damien, I want to comment on what you said, because we were recently working with a district where, they realized when they were having crisis recently, they didn't have a crisis response manual. You know, now's the time to get all of these things in place,
Right.
to come together and make sure that we have clear policies, practices, and procedures for how we do things. And I do think it's so important what you talked about in terms of your systems work. I can see today we have a lot of people listening here who more than just school counselors and others who might be psychologists, social workers, behavior specialists, interventionists. The more we can work together and collaborate and respect each other's roles, ethics, and responsibilities, and create systems where we make sure that we're not, you know, not everyone's not seeing the same students and others are falling in the cracks. Like, we actually find a way to ensure the appropriate referral and support system for the students. If doing that collaboratively with your student service providers in and outside the building helps you with this efficiency thing that we're looking at. Two more things I'd like to talk about in terms of efficiency is that if your team of school counselors or your district of school counselors could get together and say, what are the most often questions we're asked? And then just answer them, put them on the website, and then let's move that off. You just saved some time. Let's get the FAQs out there for all the things people are concerned about. Counselors know the things that people ask over and over again. So we gotta be proactive about that. And finally, if you're doing things one-on-one, and then if you do them 3-on-1, they're just as effective. 5, you're doing a small group of 5, just as effective. 10, great. Now it's 100, not working. Okay, let's back up. So as we look at evaluating the impact of what we do, taking a look to see at some point, you know, if the group's too large, you might lose your impact. So just being thoughtful about that and paying attention to it. You might save a lot of time and realize you can teach that in tier 1, just like Damien's talking about, get the content across and save a lot of time. As we can see.
Thank you. So just to respond to a lot of the questions, this is what Damien does. When you have Damien on, this is the risk you run. He gets people really excited about a lot of stuff. And so a lot of people have asked about some of the resources and how we can contact. So just so everybody knows, we are recording this. We'll send a link out. You'll be able to access it and review after. And then at the end, we are going to put up a slide with contact information for Damien and Trish. And so you can reach out directly to them and ask about any of the resources that they reference. We'll try to monitor the chat room as well, and keep those, but we'll make sure that you have contact information because there's so much information being shared. I think Trish set us up really nicely for the next question that I wanted to get to, which is kind of speaking more directly to the rest of the educators out there. What can educators in schools do, or maybe even what do they need to understand to be able to make better use of the counselors in their schools? And in particular right now, you know, where it can feel like we're a little bit more siloed than maybe we've even felt in the past, just because of what social distancing and virtual delivery has done to us. What can educators in schools do? What do they need to understand to make best use of their counselors? And let's just stay in the same order. Let's go Trish and then
Okay.
Damien.
Well, first of all, let's remember that our school counselors are also human beings, and there's a lot coming at them. You know, everyone is turning to them. They went into this field because they are helpers, and they're going to do whatever they can to help. That is who they are in their core. But we need to be on the lookout for them sometimes, because I don't want to generalize, but some school counselors aren't quite as good as at their own self-care as they might need to be. And, you know, we have to be able to give them grace and to give them patience as well, because their sponges are empty. You know, they try to come to get each day with a new sponge ready to give all they have to students, but there's a lot of people pulling them in different directions. And whether it's administrator, teacher, parents, students, or at their own homes, they have their own children, or maybe they have their own family members who are sick or have had COVID, or maybe they're also experiencing some issues with racism themselves. Like, there's a lot that counselors are taking in, and they're so busy helping others that one of the things they can benefit from the most is somebody just listening to them. Give them an opportunity to talk, meet with them regularly, just hear from them, respect their position, trust that they know what they're doing, and give them an opportunity. And if a counselor says, I need a timeout, please listen. They don't often ask for help. And when they do, they need it, and it's our responsibility to support them during these times. Please remember that school counselors work in 3 domains. not just mental health, not just social emotional, not just academic, and not just college and career, but all three of those domains are part of the school counselor's responsibilities. So they have many ways in which they can support others, and they can't just be stuck in one of those domains all the time. Additionally, I mentioned before the tiered approach, making sure that we're trying to do things for all students first, and then intervening, and then going to tier 3 instead of misusing the school counselor as though they're the emergency room doctor. It's very important that we utilize and support the school counselors to do their appropriate roles, eliminate their non-school counseling responsibilities. I know we all have to do a few of them. That's part of a fair share responsibility, but it really is important to check in with school counselors to make sure that if they're being misused, that we advocate for their appropriate use. And I know we've talked about ASCA. I cannot be a stronger advocate for people knowing your ASCA position statements, knowing your ethical responsibilities, and making sure, again, that we remember that the school counselors, they're some of the most hopeful people we have. They're some of our strongest advocates. Include their voice at the table. Include them in the leadership decisions that are being made. Trust them when they tell you that there are concerns that they have about students, and respect them as experts in the work that they do. Those are my first thoughts. Damien?
Yeah, I echo everything that you said. I had a school counselor reach out to me this morning. It was so beautiful. The title of the email was checking in, and she said, you know, you check in on us often, but I doubt that anybody checks in on you. So how are you doing? And it meant the world. So checking in with your school counselors should be a priority. Man, there are so many things with this. Again, reminding folks that school counselors aren't guidance counselors. They work on the whole child. And I think what's problematic often is that, you know, sometimes our school leaders are looking at us and kind of comparing us to their guidance counselors back in the day, you know. And so really we really have to do a good job at educating folks on what a school counselor really does. And one of the documents that is a favorite in Kentucky. I can talk about comprehensive school counseling and the Kentucky framework all day, but the document that people really want to see is the appropriate versus inappropriate activities for school counselors. So, so showing that to principals and not being like really hardcore about it, like in your face about it, but really just showing them, you know, this is where I'm spending the majority of my time if it's on that inappropriate activity side. And this is really what I should be doing. How can we get me more on this side of the table? So, so that's going to be really important. School counselors really do save lives every single day. I don't know a better way of putting it, but in the current state of the world, it really is a super concern, you know, that we have kids that are just struggling. And it doesn't matter if a counselor's working in a high socioeconomic status school or a high poverty school, there's trauma there, you know, and we've got to make sure that our school counselors have space to work on that trauma. Because when they don't, when that trauma is not addressed, then we begin to worry. That's when we see kids that need those tier 3 interventions. And then finally, school counselors can help schools achieve many school improvement plans. So if you want better attendance, right, you can ask a school counselor to get involved. Again, putting them at the table, seeking their voice. You want higher achievement and higher graduation rates? Again, you need the voice of a school counselor. You want to improve behavior? A lot of people think that that's just an assistant principal's job, but that is really something that school counselor gets in there, does some individual counseling, does some small group counseling that's really targeted. They can do all of those things. So basically educating the folks of what school counselors role is, what they can do, and giving them a voice at the table.
Love it. Anything to respond, Trish?
Everything you said. I mean, yes.
Perfect.
The audience doesn't realize that Trish and I are kindred spirits. We discovered that the other day.
Yeah, in the prep, I'm like, yeah, you can just have Damien and he'd say everything I said.
So good. Let's stick on that same theme. Let's talk specifically now about what might be helpful to try to help recommendations to help administrators specifically engage more in counselors' roles. Because I think that can be a really helpful suggestion. And I think the order is working. Let's just stay in that same order. Let's go Trish and then Damien.
Okay, well, one of the documents that we've used a lot in our trainings, I'm so grateful to the College Board and to ASCA that they put together a document with counselor-principal relationship. And it's so important because if you haven't seen it, it's out there. You can Google it. There's a toolkit. And it's so important that the relationship of counselors and administrators is a positive one, that there's mutual respect and that there's trust and that there's open conversations, you know, and if there's not, then there are activities that actually in a toolkit that's provided that can really help them with building that relationship. But it's vital that school counselors and administrators are aligned in their common mission and their purpose and their expectations and their goals. And it's correct that the administrator agreement that you'd have, you know, really outline that perfectly. But we have to engage administrators more in understanding the role of a school counselor. As he said, many administrators, if they haven't been school counselors, don't have any idea what their role truly is. And we have to educate them. So they need to learn about our profession because it's different. And attend a conference. They can look at ASCA conference, their state school counseling conference, our conference for the National School Counselor Leadership Conference, wherever they can go to learn about the appropriate role. And then they need to meet regularly. They need to be at least once a month. They've got to meet to talk about what's working, what isn't working, what are the policies and practices and procedures that are changing, shifting, how do we collaborate together, and making sure the voice of the counselors is at that table. They need to be included in those conversations. And I would encourage your school counselors to share their results. And I would hold them accountable to do so if I was an administrator, partly because counselors are so busy doing services that they often need permission to actually take time to work on their programmatic responsibilities. You know, 80% should be in direct service to students, but they need program planning and accountability time as well. And setting that aside, just like teachers have to set it aside to look at their data and results and share them, is an important part of their job. And as an administrator, when you hold them accountable and you ask them to share the things that are working that are not working, it really does provide a counselor a space to share their impact. And some counselors are shy about that. They think they're tooting their own horn. They think they're trying to brag, and they need permission and support and assistance to do that. And it matters. And you find when you hold counselors accountable, the administrators are delighted to see the results, but we have to create that space for that to happen. Examples of the impact they're having. And that happens by regularly having meetings and conversations about, you know, designing, implementing, evaluating, improving the program, and doing that together with admin so that they're on the same team, not just at the school site, but at the central office, at the district office, so that we have consistent programming district-wide and similar expectations district-wide for the role of a school counselor.
Awesome, thanks. Damien.
Yeah, so I totally agree. In my experience, school counselors are so humble that they don't want to come off as bragging about the impact that they're making, but they have such an opportunity to make huge impacts in the lives of their students, lives of their staffs, the family, the community, et cetera. So showing that impact is going to be really, really huge. I would also suggest facilitating a school counseling advisory council. So the American School Counseling Association also has information about that and templates on that. And they recommend doing a minimum of 2 meetings per year. But when you do that, you're going to have principals, teachers, caregivers, community members, and students reflect on your comprehensive school counseling programs. And these sessions are going to open their eyes to all that you do. And once these folks know all that you do to help kids, they won't want you doing anything else. We've got a school counselor in Kentucky. Actually, she's going to be the president of the Kentucky School Counseling Association next year. But she just recently did a school counseling advisory council session, and one of the people on her advisory is the chief of police in her community. And what's cool about that is he can bring in different information about what's happening in the community. She can talk about what services she provides. Well, last week he emailed her and said, can you please share with me some data on what you do? And also, I really want to know what you do and what you wish you could do if there were more of you, because I want to advocate for more school counselors in your school. And that's what's going to happen with that school counseling advisory council. Once people realize that you're wearing the 100 hats and you're wearing them well, right? But because of the 100 hats, you're not able to focus nearly as much on this as you would like, they're going to help you advocate. And then have that give and take. You know, I talked about it a little bit earlier. Don't be so rigid. So when talking to your principal about needing things to be taken off your plate, you know, see if the principal can find other ways to help, and see if you can offer different ways that you can jump in for different things as well. So one thing that you might be surprised to hear me say is that for us at my school, we used to have one lunch duty that we were in charge of, and we would have to kind of stand in one quadrant of the cafeteria, and kids could come up to us, but we really couldn't move out of that quadrant for safety reasons. Well, we went to our principal and said, not only do we want to continue doing lunchroom duty, but we want our whole counseling team to be in all lunches, because we want to create a counselor corner where kids can, and we don't want to be in the quadrant though. But we want to have a table in the back of the cafeteria. And if kids have questions, if they have concerns, if they need support, they can come to any one of us during every single lunch, every single day. So that's some of that give and take. And we actually honestly saved lives because we were in the lunchroom. We were able to put eyes on kids. And when kids just didn't seem right, we were able to kind of ask questions, take them on walks throughout the building, take them to our offices and get more information. And honestly, we did. I can think of one instance where we really did save a life in that situation. In Kentucky, 60% of a school counselor's time must be done in direct student services. So we have our school counselors track their data, and then superintendents have to submit to us at the Kentucky Department of Education how counselors are using their time. And we're hoping that that's also an eye-opening opportunity for superintendents to see, okay, so our counselors are supposed to be doing 60% of their time with direct student services, but some of them are doing 20% or 30%. You know, we've got to make a change. So that's something else that you might consider.
Awesome, thank you. Let's talk a little bit. Let's pivot over to one of the big challenges that I think is really universal right now, which is trying to motivate unmotivated students, and any strategies you might have for that. I'm going to switch up the order a little bit here. We're going to go Damien and then Trish. Share any ideas or strategies that you have right now around trying to help motivate those unmotivated students.
Okay, just to go back for 1 second. So when I talked about what's happening in our state, so my point is track the way that you're spending your time and make sure that you're sharing that with your school administrators. Okay, so now ideas or strategies we have on motivating unmotivated students. So first off, have teachers regularly make time to personally connect with each student in their classes one-on-one. We should be doing the same as school counselors. Create time and activities that allow students to connect socially in class, you know, even if it is virtual. Ask them, you know, we loved the question at the beginning, where are you from? You know, tell us something about yourselves, you know, and that helps you kind of interact with one another and learn things about one another. Well, it does the same thing for kids. You know, they want to know what's happening with their peers on a personal level. And then finally, when a student's missing, or we need to leverage personal relationships. So if that kid has a relationship with a coach, with somebody in the church, with a youth club, with a community member, we need to reach out to them and see if they can pull that child back in and support them in order to get them motivated.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that answer. I also think one of the things we've had to really remind folks of is kids need to Maslow before they bloom, is the quote we've been using. We've got to figure out where they're at. You know, some of these kids are really in basic needs. I mean, their life situation isn't conducive to coming to school ready to learn right now. And we need to make sure that we're not judging them because they're saying, well, they're just not motivated. Let's find out the root cause. Let's do a root cause analysis and find out from the students who aren't attending, you know, what's happening in your life. What is the current situation there? And when the counselor can dig deeper into that and ask questions, you might find that the student has housing issue, they've had a death in the family, there may be illness. So we want to find out, basic needs, are they safe? Do they feel they have belonging? Like Damien was talking about, relationships matter. So before we can really get into, Bloom's taxonomy of, really teaching students those higher level thinking and contributing and skill, we've got to be able to make sure we check and see how their students are doing and make sure that they're connected, because in relationships, that's everything. And when counselors are doing tier 1 well all the time, then they're not seen as just interventionists. They are seen as school counselors for every student in the school. And they already know you, like Damien was saying, when you're in the, when you put your table outside and, instead of hanging out in the counseling office, maybe you're out handing out college and career information or financial aid information. And, maybe one counselor stays inside for private conversations, but other people are out. Creating those systems of relationships, connectedness, trying to make sure all students know who you are in tier 1, then there's trust and respect. And then when things happen, they're more likely to come to you. And then you can have the next conversation. When we talk about students not being motivated, I do like solution-focused brief counseling. That's very important. We can ask students miracle questions, talk to them about, where have they been successful in the past, build on their strengths, really thinking about, the non-cognitive factors involved, and really trying to make sure that the intervention matches the student's needs. And I think it's problematic when we assume that a student who's not doing well is unmotivated. Maybe they actually need tutoring. It used to be that we were concerned they're just putting everybody in tutoring. Maybe we need to find out if they're unmotivated. Both are true. There may be multiple reasons why a student isn't attending or engaged or turning in a classroom. And a counselor is kind of like a CSI agent. It's our job to sort of figure out what's going on and to protect the student from being labeled as the red student, or whatever that is. I struggle sometimes with some of the surveys that are happening because I worry about where that information goes, who has it, is it confidential, and kids are getting labeled. And the last thing they need about after all of they've been through is to be labeled at risk. Great, that's helpful. This is a challenge for us. So all of these things are part of the answer, and always remembering that sometimes the issue isn't a student issue, it's a systems issue. Sometimes it's not that they're not motivated, but the system isn't designed to engage them. So what do we own in this? And what systems can we fix that might improve engagement opportunities for students?
Can I just add that, a lot of people think about the word apathy, and that word does not apply during this time. Kids are adjusting. Think about how long it took us to adjust to the pandemic and to virtual school counseling and to figure out, how are we going to get our ducks in a row? Now think about what that would be like for a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old. You know what I mean? So a lot of it is just, they're struggling with adjusting to the new normal. And it takes people longer at times.
I'm just over here cheering, like I'm trying not to jump out of my seat and say amen. This is so good. Could you maybe talk just a little bit? I know one of the real challenges, both of you talked about the power of connection, and from a resilience standpoint, 40 years of resilience research very consistently shows that connection with that one caring adult is, one of the most consistent protective factors to try to help build resilience and influence resilience in kids. One of the challenges we do have right now that's come up a few times in the chat tool is, how do we do this job effectively, and how do we connect during this virtual and blended model that most of us are in, where we may not be sitting in an office with a student on a regular basis now, like maybe we historically have. What ideas do you have for helping to improve effectiveness during this virtual blended model? Let's stick with the same order. Let's go Damien and then Trish.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is going to be, I loved how one participant talked about, we've got to check in with our staff as well. So finding ways to do check-ins with students and staff members, families, et cetera, specifically families that attendance might be an issue with their student. I think that's going to be really important. Again, the virtual school counseling, the school counseling lessons, providing those, finding unique ways to offer those. I have used PowerPoint for a long time, but I'm very interested in using Adobe Spark. I'm interested in finding other platforms to present information that's super engaging to kids. Ask kids to present with you. Sometimes when I would go in, I used to be a high school counselor, so I would go into a classroom and do a lesson. Well, sometimes they'd be like, okay, GPA is important, ACT scores are important, et cetera. But when I would have a senior with me, and that senior could back up everything I said, and they could say, not only is this stuff important, but this is how it really plays into my own life and my own experiences. That was huge. So see if you can get a student to jump in on some of that stuff with you as well.
Awesome.
I'm so impressed with what counselors have created in terms of virtual offices, virtual
Yes.
calming spaces, virtual ways for students to teach themselves, the whole flipped classroom part of this. We have a school district we're working with where the counselor has created optional morning meetings for students who just want to come and connect with students. It's not about homework or anything else. It's just connection time. And she's finding that the students who come to that more than 3 times a week are doing far better than those who aren't. And she's collecting some results on it. So being creative and thinking of new ways to create spaces for students to connect online with each other. Counselors are doing fun, creative things. They're making TikTok videos. They're doing Instagram. So they're out of the box on this. And I'm so grateful for our new school counselors who've just come into our profession in the last 5 years, because they're killing it. Those guys know what they're doing. And I think, I consider myself relatively technically illiterate, but I learn new things every day when we train and consult with districts that have counselors that have been in just a few years. They're teaching us a lot of things. And I would encourage new counselors to share with more seasoned counselors who have professional wisdom, all the new tools and bells and whistles, anything to get those students interested and engaged, because there's a lot of cool stuff out there.
Yeah, counselor drop-in times is something else that's important. Erica Martin mentioned that. Holding office hours that kids can pop into a Zoom meeting with you is really good.
Yep. Absolutely. And I lend my endorsement as well to connect with your young and your new counselors and practitioners and teachers in general, because from a relevance standpoint, they really are tapped into a lot of the tools that are really meaningful to youth culture right now. And I will say, Damien, we will have to talk later, but we've been doing some stuff with Spark. Spark is a kind of a fun format. You can make kind of quick hit video clips that look really cool. They look well produced, even though you might be doing them on your phone or something. And it's a great way to share information in a cool way. So we need to talk about that, because we've done some fun stuff.
And we've got some other stuff in the works too with Photo Voice. So
yes, the Photo Voice. Yes, I'm gonna get too excited about all this. All right. Anything either of you want to add that you didn't mention that you wanted to mention before we move on? I want to give you both a chance just to talk about upcoming conferences that you have. But anything else you want to add?
I saw several folks mention that there are school social workers in the house, and I'm sure we've got school psychologists and other mental health practitioners, and our school social workers in Kentucky are unreal. They're unbelievable. Our school psychologists are as well. When we have crises, when we need individual or small group counseling, those are folks that we call on. They are just like a school counselor in many ways. They help and support the whole child. And that's where that interconnected systems framework comes in that I mentioned earlier. They have a place in every single tier. I think far too often folks see school social workers and school psychs as folks that stick in tier 2 and tier 3. However, they can really be super helpful in tier 1. We just have to find ways to collaborate and make sure that we're on the same page and aligned. So yes, school social workers, school psychs, you guys are amazing.
Thank you. Trish, you're on mute.
Right, Jason. Yes, you are amazing.
I was ruffling my paper. So Yeah, no, it's so important because we've done trainings where we had counselors, social workers, behavior specialists, and psychologists together. And it was such, I know I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but it was so enlightening for them and so helpful to them to read each other's ethics, position statements, their national model, their expectations, what their training is, what their expert is, so that they're not asked to do things that are outside of their appropriate role and responsibility, and that we're very clear on respecting that. You know, we want to respect how people were trained and what they're, and not misuse them, and then create some systems for how do we refer. Do they go directly to the social worker? Do they go through the school counselor first? Let's have that conversation. Well, it depends on, you know, how many support services providers you have and what's the best efficient and effective way to do that. But it's important to have those open conversations so that we're not working in silos. We're all part of the same team.
Yes.
When we talk about going, you know, I think about it as a metaphor, like driving on a freeway. We're all heading the same direction. You might be in a little bit different lane. Sometimes we carpool. Sometimes we got to put our blinker on if we're getting into your lane. But let's all think about the goal, objective outcome is moving forward, supporting each other in the success of our students.
Love it.
I just wanted to say, there's somebody on the call that's a school social worker. When the pandemic first hit, she was one of the first people to, her name's Serena, she's from Lexington, Kentucky. She was one of the first people to go out and buy toilet paper for families and deliver that, buy meals for families and deliver that. So truly, you all are a blessing.
Yeah, it's an incredible system when they work well together. I think your voices have really inspired a lot of people, and I think people would be interested in knowing how they could either get a hold of you or hear from you in the future. I know there's probably some conference opportunity coming up. Would you like to share just a little bit about what some of your upcoming projects are that you're going to be working on and that people listening might be interested in? Let's go, Damien, and then Trish.
Yeah, man, there's so much cool stuff. So you and I are working on Photo Voice, and Photo Voice is basically this methodology. If you watch that last ASCA webinar from last week, you'll learn much more about it. But you get to, one thing with equity work is you need to think about the artifacts that are in your school, right? What's on the walls? What's in the classrooms? Do they actually represent the students that you have in your building? Do they represent the staffs? If not, Photo Voice is one cool way of doing it, right? You can have a student take two pictures side by side, one of an obstacle that they face and one of them overcoming that obstacle. Well, with that, other kids are going to be able to point to that and say, I'm going through something really difficult. But here I see that another student that kind of looks like me or I can relate to has gone through something, and he or she has overcome it and come out on the other side. I can too. So that's one thing that I'm really excited about working on with WhyTry and just resilience. There's just so much, but I'm going to be super fast. Some of my stuff is there have been different people that have been on some different webinars with ASCA. So I've got presentations in Ireland and Mexico coming up, all about equity. In those countries, they're very interested in race-based stress and trauma, and understanding how to facilitate courageous conversations about race in schools. So those are just a few.
Thank you so much, Trish.
We are so excited to have the National School Counselor Leadership Conference coming up in February. Some people are asking about the staying in their lane. I will get you Jason, I'll get you a link to some information on staying in your lane, but I know it's also going to be one of the sessions we have at our conference. But in addition to our conference, there are so many other school counseling conferences. I would encourage the school counselors in each state to look at your professional association, look at ASCA. And if your state department's not putting on trainings and doing the support like Damien is in his, then ask for it, advocate for it, and say, look, this is what's happening in other states. How about our state? Like, be an advocate and push on your state department, because school counselors deserve PD like anybody else does. And there's a tremendous amount of funding that's going to be coming out very soon. Now that we have, you know, a new president and we have a new person at the USDOE, and very strongly focused on funding coming out for professional development and through the CARES Act. And so as school counselors, we're hoping you will advocate for that training, whether it's with your association or your state department or a national conference.
And I'm sharing a slide right now with information on that virtual school counseling leadership conference.
got to say one last thing. I've got to say one last thing. We are blessed to have our Kentucky School Counseling Association. They're growing by leaps and bounds. They put on a conference every year that just is unbelievable. So they'll have one in the fall. I just met with their board, who's amazing. So big shout out to you. Kentucky Counseling Association encompasses all mental health professionals in our state, and they're so focused on some of this racial equity work. So I want to give them a big shout out as well.
Thank you. Last question, the one I love to end on. These are always my favorite answer. And you know what? I'm going to do something different. I haven't done this before, but I'm going to do it because I think it helps us all. So the question is this: what's giving you hope right now? And I'm going to open up the question to everybody that is in attendance, as well as to our panelists here. And feel free to share your answer in the chat box of what's giving you hope. But I want to hear directly from our panelists. Let's hear from Damien first, and then Trish. Tell me what's giving you hope right now.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Yesterday's inauguration has given me so much hope, right? Especially when it comes to diversity and acceptance of people that aren't the same, that look different, that have different lived experiences, et cetera. Again, the work of our Kentucky School Counseling Association, the work with our Kentucky Counseling Association, the work of our counselors in our state. Our counselors really do want to equip themselves for what's to come, and they're finding innovative ways to do so, like the Bitmoji counseling offices that Trish mentioned. They partner with community agencies, they build true comprehensive school counseling programs, and they're going above and beyond. And then I would just finish up with, those counselors that check in with one another, those counselors that are providing PLC, they have professional learning communities within their entire districts, because they might not have a director of school counselors, but they know that they need to row in the same direction together, especially when it comes to communicating with principals and superintendents. So they have these PLCs where they really align themselves. Finally, music is always something that moves my soul and gives me hope, along with family. We've got one of our little 5-year-old twins today. It's his 100th day of daycare, and he dressed like a 100-year-old little man. And they're sweet little faces. I've got 3 boys. They're sweet faces. My wife Abigail. They all give me hope.
I love it. Thank you, Trish.
My grandchildren give me hope. The reason I still do this work is because they don't necessarily still have a school counselor. So until they do, my hope is that they'll have one. So I'm staying in this until we get school counselors for everybody. Amanda Gorman gives me hope. Boy, our poet laureate, how phenomenal was she? Our first lady gives me hope because of her focus on education. And by the way, 3 o'clock today, she's going to be doing something with NEA. So you might want to watch that. The increased funding, because education has been so underfunded for so long. The resilience I see in school counselors and the twinkle in their eye when we talk to them about their pride in the work that they're doing, because they're like, oh, let me tell you what happened. We did this, and it worked. And they said things. I was talking to an alternative ed counselor who said that since the pandemic, their alternative ed students have actually increased their credit earning by 39%. I'm like, how cool is that? Like, there's so much to be excited about. Yes, of course, we have challenges that lie ahead, but I'm hopeful about the science of hope. And I'm hopeful about, like, for instance, I don't know if you've seen Hope Rising, the text, but Chan Hellman is one of our keynote speakers. I'm excited for the message he'll bring about hope. I'm excited for the Reach Higher work and the fact that we're going to have Stephanie Sproul come and talk about, the Reach Higher work that's still happening. So there's so much still happening that counselors are finding joy in the work that they do. That gives me hope. It gives me hope for my grandchildren that they will have a school counselor, and that everyone watching this today, their grandchildren will too.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. I do want to mention our founder, Christian Moore, who's been on a lot of these. He is going to be presenting at the conference that we talked about, the School Counselors Leadership Conference. I think he's actually going to be doing some work next year with the Kentucky Department of Education as well. So we're so thrilled to be able to foster these relationships. For me, the thing that's given me hope, Damien almost made me misty thinking about it. I was thinking about my own kids, and I've probably talked openly about them right now, but what they're dealing with and seeing them be resilient in the face of adversity. My second oldest son broke his collarbone in December on his first day of high school basketball. In the first game he played in, he broke his collarbone. We did surgery. He's doing good. And last week, he went out in the driveway and he was shooting a basketball. and he was feeling good, and he just had this huge smile. It was so perfect. He went out again yesterday, and I think yesterday was a new hope that a lot of us haven't felt in a few years. And my son looked at me, and he hit a 3-point shot, and he just smiled at me. And we just had this moment in the driveway where I was already feeling hopeful because of yesterday in general. He hit this 3 and looked up at me, and it was such a beautiful moment. And I thought, you know what, the future's in good hands. So
That's
I,
beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you for
educators,
sharing. Thank you for
oh
sharing that.
man, thank you. I appreciate feeling you all making me feel comfortable enough to do it. So let's conclude this. We've talked about a lot of great things. I think you've inspired a lot of people. Big virtual round of applause for our panelists, Trish and Damien. And then huge virtual round of applause for all of you as educators and practitioners and mental health professionals. We all need each other to get through this. We all make each other stronger. And this community is such an inspiring community to be a part of. Oh, I'm going to put up contact information if anybody wants to get a hold of any of us. And then this is being recorded,